I had the privilege of spending some time with a man called Anthony Flew a few years ago. He died just shortly. Anthony Flew was very, very famous in the sense that his philosophical essay on theology and falsification was the most widely reprinted philosophical essay of the 20th century. When he was a student at Oxford, he debated a guy called C.S. Lewis and won. So he was considered to be exceptionally bright, and he was a very gifted atheist. At one point, if you went to the Secular Society's website, you would have seen that his book on epistemology, on truth, on philosophy, how do we know what is true, how do we know what isn't true, was the basic recommended textbook for skeptics. And indeed, when I met with him, he explained to me how actually Richard Dawkins and various others had actually sent their books to him for his editorial advice as a philosopher and an atheist about whether they were making any philosophical mistakes, and also to be coached and trained by him. And he debated many, many Christians through his time. Now, one of the illustrations that he helped make famous was, if you give enough monkeys typewriters, eventually they'll produce the works of Shakespeare. That was his line. Now, a few years ago, his life made front-page news in the UK, and in all the Sunday papers, because he published a book in which he said, there is a God after all. I was wrong. It's not a very big book. It's called There Is a God, by Anthony Flew. If you're interested, F-L-E-W. It tells the story of his life, more or less. And in it, he recalls what happened one day when he was debating someone, and this person said, you know the whole thing about the monkeys and the typewriters? He said, yes. He says, do you know that a research grant was given to a group of students who put a typewriter in a cage of 6 monkeys and left it there for a month to see what the results were? Now, apart from using it as a toilet, they produced 6 typed pages, but not one single word. Which is all the more incredible when you consider the shortest word in the English language is A or I. However, to qualify as a word, it has to be separated by spaces. So if you have only 30 keys on your typewriter, and most have more, but if you have 30, the chance of randomly generating a one-letter word, therefore, is 1 in 27,000. Now, this got Flew thinking. Forget about reproducing the works of Shakespeare. How much effort is needed to reproduce randomly one Shakespearean sonnet? Now, Shakespearean sonnets are by definition 14 lines long. Let's take, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? There are 288 characters in that sonnet. The chance of randomly producing a Shakespearean sonnet on this basis is 1 times 10 to the power with 690 zeros after it. Now let me try to explain to you how big a number that is. If you take all of the known mass in the universe and break it down into particles, protons, neutrons, and electrons, and count them, at our best guess, there are 10 to the power of 80 particles in the known universe. If you were to take all of the mass in the universe and break it down, there aren't enough particles on which to write down the trials. Now, however, let's suppose we work with a different model. You take all the mass in the universe, everything, you, what you're sitting on, everything that exists, everything that we think is out there, and we convert it into microchips. Every microchip weighs 1/1,000,000 of a gram. Every microchip 1 million times a second produces random combinations of 288 letters, and let's assume that these computers have been running since time itself began. You would have randomly produced 10 to the power of 90 random trials. The universe would have to be 10 to the power of 600 times older than it currently is on this basis to randomly produce one Shakespearean sonnet. Now, most of you don't know what 10 to the power of 600 is. That's such a big number. You need to find a derivative trader or someone who works for a hedge fund, they'll explain it to you. Now, this doesn't prove, by the way, that God created the universe. This is not an argument for existence. It's just to say that that illustration, which so easily captivates our mind, is deceptively simple. It is far more complicated than we may initially think. And what happened for Flew, you can read it in his book, is when he saw all of this and had a debate with this guy, he thought life is far more complicated than a Shakespearean sonnet. And it set him on a journey. What happens if we're not here by chance? What happens if there is a God who put us here?